terms of our test for tomorrow, it's pretty evenly distributed through the chapters. 28, that's progressivism, the introduction to progressivism, the notions of progressivism, eventually the presidency of Theodore Roosevelt and the election in 1812, or not 1812, 1912 of Taft. That's all in that chapter. And then I think chapter 29 starts with Wilson. Wilson being elected, and his whole administration is in chapter 29, as well as the entrance into World War I. Now there is a little bit in that chapter about Wilson's other foreign policy, particularly with Mexico. So there might be a question on the test about that, that Wilson dispatched troops against Mexico. And that's kind of a backdrop for, the whole Zimmerman letter, that we were discussing today. And so it goes through, chapter 29 goes through the Declaration of War. So chapter 30 starts with the Declaration of War and talks about a number of things. It goes through the Declaration of War, talks about, the restriction of civil liberties that we talked about today, the anti-war propaganda, and it talks about other things. That there's going to be a question about industrial mobilization, that how they take over the wartime economy and mobilize it for war. Maybe even, I don't know if there's a question about the Great Migration. And then there's a pretty significant amount about the end of the war. Now, we're not there yet. We talked about today the Russian Revolution, the Second Russian Revolution. So there's two, right? There's two Russian revolutions. There's the March Revolution, where the Tsar is toppled, and then there's the Bolshevik Revolution, where the communist, the socialist, Lenin takes over Russia and establishes the USSR. And that's one of the most consequential things certainly in modern history. I mean, the whole shape of the 20th century is going to be influenced by, the rise of communism and, the Cold War, etc. So it's a big deal. And it's certainly a big deal for World War I. And that's kind of where we left off, and so then what we're going to talk about is how that all transpires and the peace treaty, and that's going to be a pretty significant part. Now, how much of that will get done tomorrow, I don't know. We're probably going to end up taking this test on Tuesday. So we'll just do as much as we're going to do tomorrow, and then Monday we'll finish it up, and then we'll start the 1920s on Monday, and then we'll just take this test on Tuesday and finish, the 1920s, next week. So we will be able to do that. Yeah, the Roaring 20s. Yes, we're going to do a paper on that.
Have you ever seen Downton Abbey?
What's that?
Have you ever seen Downton Abbey?
No, but I've heard of it. I've heard of Downton Abbey. It's very popular. I know that.
It's based in the 90s.
Oh, it does?
Yeah.
So now, take a look at this 10 documents to remember. Now, this is kind of AP material here.
I do not have
You know what that is? 10 documents to remember.
Oh, I didn't get
You have
that.
it right? Is
that. I
that
got
it?
this question.
Oh, what is that? Well, that's not what I wanted you to hear.
I didn't get that either.
10 documents to remember.
I didn't get
Oh, you did?
that. Sample question?
I didn't want that. Oh, did I want that? I don't think I did. What are the sample questions?
Evaluate the
it's
You have
extent
two?
to which the
Yeah.
Declaration of Independence marked a turning point in American history, analyzing what changed and what stayed the same from the period immediately before the Declaration to the period immediately following it.
Yeah, that's an example of the type of essay question that you would see on the AP test. Do you think that's harder than the ones we've been doing? Let me see.
Some historians have argued that the American Revolution was not revolutionary in nature, support, modify, or refute this.
So basically argue if they were terrorists or not.
No, I mean, so, yeah, this is called the long essay. There's one. So you have a choice of two and there's one. And it says evaluate the extent to which the Declaration marked a turning point. So how do you define a turning point?
The other side starts to win.
Well, I mean,
Change.
well, that's a turning point in American history.
Oh,
So
well, that's
it
different.
changes from one thing to another, right? So So was the Declaration of Independence a turning point? What's the alternative to it not being a turning point?
Being stagnant.
And not changing much, if anything.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the alternative is that, you know, American history is kind of going along, and this was just a natural part of it. A turning point would suggest that when this happened, things somehow changed and moved in a different direction. So, what do you think is true? Did the Declaration turn things, or did the Declaration just a part of a larger continuum of so if you, let's say you said, well, the Declaration is a turning point, then you'd have to say why you're saying that. You know, what changed as a result of that? Now, obviously, I mean, you're thinking back on what you remember from a long time ago. Hopefully, you know, in the course of, you know, the next month or so, when we review and review and review, that you'll remember, you know, things that would enable you to respond to that a little bit more effectively, you know. And now, if I were doing it, and it's interesting, the second question one says, some historians have argued the American Revolution was not revolutionary in nature. Support, modify, or refute this interpretation, providing specific evidence to justify your answer. I took this class recently, you know, and it's from a university in Ohio, and I take it online, but it's Skype. You know, the professor is there, and, you know, I can see him, and he's talking, and, you know, we're all there, and, you know, we can answer questions, etc. The final question for us, we had one, the final was, he gave us this question, and he said, you have 3 hours to respond to this question. And he gave it to us at, no, we had 90 minutes to respond. You had 90 minutes to respond to this question, and that was the question we had to respond to. And I said that the American Revolution was, in fact, revolutionary. Now, what would that mean if we said the American was revolutionary? I argued it was, right? So if I argued it was, what would that mean, Raymond?
It means that it wasn't just the inevitable, it's pretty much, it's similar, that it wasn't just the inevitable outcome of a chain of events that actually changed the course of history.
Yeah, in a way. I mean, I think on one level, if we say something is revolutionary, you're right. It's all about change, right? So it's kind of a similar question, as you said. You know, did the revolution result in something radical? You know, something that was a radical change? And the argument I put forward was, yes, it was a political change and a social change. And there's a big argument out there in terms of social change that a guy named Gordon Wood made this argument in his book, Radicalism of the American Revolution. He argued that the revolution was basically an assault on deference and stratification in society. The whole European notion of position and place in society, like Downton Abbey. That's a big thing, because that's all part of it, right? The help has their place, right, and the people have their place, and that the revolution was at the core a challenge to that. You know, that the Americans, whether it was fully wittingly or not, they were challenging these ideas of deference and inequality with notions of equality. And in that regard, it was revolutionary. The people that argue against it say, how can it be revolutionary when it didn't change the status of women, and it didn't eliminate slavery, and it kept things economically pretty much the way that they were, you know, and so how can it be revolutionary, right? So then others say, well, wait a minute, look at the notion of self-government, the notion of equality, which is truly revolutionary. Nobody in the world ever thought about, you know, equality. So I made that case, but you could make the other case, right, you know, as well. All right. I mean, so these are the kinds of questions that you might have to think about. I don't know where they came from. It must be, I don't know where I got these. But I hope that there are examples from the AP. Now look at the 10 documents to remember. So what I did last year is I thought in your responses to anything, to any of the essays or anything, you want to be able to make reference to documentary evidence, right? So I kind of went chronologically and I thought, what are 10 documents that would be something that a competent student of history would know? So thinking to myself, what are 10 documents that a competent student of history would know and potentially be able to apply in an essay to make yourself look smart, for lack of a better, explanation. So if you look there, the Declaration of Independence, Federalist 10, Washington's Farewell Address, the first issue of the Liberator, Jackson's Bank Veto, Abraham Lincoln's House Divided Speech, the Plessy versus Ferguson, the Truman Doctrine in 47, the letter from a Birmingham jail in 60-something. Alan, where are the other people?
I don't know.
Are they coming?
Yes.
How many are coming?
There's
Or turn off the tape, Gondola.
You got it.